A cold wind moved through the narrow alleys of the old city just before dawn, stirring dust, carrying the faint echo of distant traffic, and brushing against the face of a young man standing motionless beneath a flickering streetlight. His name was Ameer. Anyone who saw him in that moment might have assumed he was simply lost in thought. But the truth was far heavier, far darker, and far older than a single sleepless night. Ameer had been awake for 3 days, not because he wanted to be, but because his mind refused to let him rest. Thoughts chased each other endlessly in a loop that felt like a storm with no center. Every decision he had ever made, every mistake, every fear, everything pressed on him at once. He hadn't eaten much, hadn't spoken to anyone except to assure them he was fine. He lied, because overthinking had become the cage he carried everywhere. He lifted his eyes to the sky as if searching for an answer written in the dim early morning clouds. He did not know that somewhere, in another part of the city, someone had been searching for him too. Someone who believed that overthinking doesn't just steal sleep, it slowly turns lions into sheep, warriors into wanderers, and dreams into distant echoes. Minutes passed before he finally moved, walking toward the only place he felt safe, the abandoned train yard near the edge of the city. It was a place he had discovered years ago, during one of the darkest periods of his life. Back then the silence of the yard had terrified him. Now it felt like the last place where he could breathe. The gravel crunched under his shoes. Rusted rails stretched out like broken veins. Ameer sat on an old wooden crate, wrapped his arms around himself, and closed his eyes. But peace didn't come. Instead, memories rose like ghosts. His father's voice, "Ameer, you think too much. Life isn't solved in your head, it's lived with your feet on the ground." His mother's worried whisper to his aunt, "He's drowning in his thoughts. I don't know how to pull him out." His own voice, years younger and far more hopeful, "One day I'll build something great. Something that matters." Where had that version of him gone? As he sat there, a sudden metallic click echoed behind him. Ameer flinched and spun around. A man stepped out of the shadows, old, tall, rugged, with a long gray coat and eyes that looked as though they had witnessed more than one lifetime. His beard was untrimmed, his boots heavy with mud, and his posture carried both strength and weariness. He looked like a wanderer, someone who belonged to no place and yet understood every place. Ameer's breath caught. He had never seen the man before. "You're early," the stranger said, as if he had been expecting him. His voice was deep, rough, but strangely steady. "Or maybe you haven't slept at all." Ameer swallowed. "Do I know you?" "No," the man replied, stepping closer. "But I know that look. The eyes that move even when the body is still. The heart that trembles even when the face pretends not to. I've seen it in soldiers, in leaders, in young men trying to find courage inside a maze they built themselves." Ameer took a step back. "What do you want?" The man raised an eyebrow. "The real question is, what do you want?" Ameer opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had asked himself that question 1,000 times and never found an answer. He shook his head, frustrated. "You don't know anything about me." A faint smile touched the stranger's lips. "You're wrong. I know that you're lost. I know that you've been fighting a war inside your mind for years. And I know that if you don't win that war soon, your life will no longer feel like your own." Ameer stared at him, stunned, defensive, but also strangely seen. "Who are you?" he whispered. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn notebook and placed it on the crate beside Ameer. "A mirror," he finally said. "For people like you." Ameer frowned and hesitated before picking up the notebook. It was old. The pages were yellowed, edges softened by time. On the cover, written in careful, precise handwriting, were 4 words. "The Lion Who Forgot." Ameer's heart began to pound. "What is this?" "That," the man said, "is the story of a boy who thought so much he forgot what it meant to be alive. A boy who convinced himself he was weak when in truth he had the strength of 100 men. A boy who believed his thoughts were chains when they were actually keys." Ameer flipped through the pages quickly, but they were blank. "All empty," he said. "For now," the man replied. "The story isn't written yet, because it's yours." Ameer froze. A strange uneasiness crawled through him. He wanted to ask more, but the man turned away, walking deeper into the yard. "Wait!" Ameer called. "Where are you going?" The stranger didn't turn. "I'll return when you're ready. When you figured out why lions forget their lions." Ameer felt something inside him tremble. "And how will I know I'm ready?" he shouted after him. The man stopped. Slowly he turned his head, not fully, just enough for Ameer to see his profile. "You'll know," he said, "when your thoughts stop being storms and start becoming weapons." Before Ameer could move, a train roared past on the far track. The noise shook the ground. Dust filled the air. The thunder of its wheels drowned out everything for a few seconds. And when the train finally passed, the old man was gone. Ameer looked around frantically, but there was no trace, not even footprints on the gravel. He clutched the empty notebook, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He felt fear, confusion, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. He sank slowly onto the crate again, staring at the blank pages, wondering who that man was, and why it felt like the encounter was not an accident at all. Far behind him, hidden between stacks of abandoned metal containers, a pair of eyes watched Ameer silently. Eyes that knew his past, his present, and what was coming for him. Something far greater and far darker than the overthinking that had caged him for years. Ameer didn't know it yet, but his life had already changed. The first spark had been lit. What came next would test him, reshape him, and force him to confront truths he never wanted to face. And somewhere, in the quiet morning wind, a whisper seemed to drift through the air. "Remember, lions are not born fearless. They learn." Like this video and subscribe my channel for videos like this. Ameer sat in the early morning silence, the notebook resting on his lap like a fragile weight, its blank pages reflecting the emptiness he had been carrying inside himself for years. The streetlight above flickered once more, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits around the train yard. He didn't move for a long time, trying to make sense of the encounter, trying to convince himself it had been a hallucination born from sleep deprivation. But deep down, he knew it hadn't been a dream. It had felt too real, too deliberate. The wind whispered through the rails, carrying with it the faint scent of iron and something else he couldn't name. He opened the notebook again and stared at the first blank page. The paper seemed to hum with expectation, as if waiting for him to speak, to write, to release the thoughts that had been gnawing at him. But the moment he lifted a pen, his hand trembled and doubt surged like a tide. "I can't do this," he muttered, his voice rough, almost swallowed by the vast emptiness of the yard. "Who am I to write anything meaningful? I've barely lived. I've just thought." He slammed the notebook shut. It wasn't just fear of writing. It was fear of facing himself, the raw, unfiltered truth he had buried under endless calculations, what-ifs and regrets. Overthinking had taught him to survive by imagining every failure before it happened, but in the process it had also made him small. He realized that maybe the man in the coat had been right. Maybe he had forgotten he was a lion. A sharp noise made him jump. From the shadows, a small figure emerged. A stray cat, thin and cautious, rubbed against his leg. Ameer reached down, and for the first time that morning he felt a faint sense of connection, however fleeting. He knelt and let the cat settle on his lap. Its tiny heartbeat against his fingers reminded him of something primal, life, real life, beyond the endless storm in his mind. He breathed deeply, allowing himself to be still, just for a moment. That moment shattered as a phone vibrated in his pocket. He had forgotten he had even brought it. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "You're closer than you think, but the path is darker than you imagine. Are you ready to see the truth?" Ameer's pulse quickened. The handwriting was digital, cold, yet somehow familiar, like the echo of the stranger's voice. He stared at it, unsure whether to respond. Questions raced through his mind. Who was watching him? Why did they know where he was? And most importantly, what truth? He put the phone down and felt the notebook beneath his hand. The blank pages seemed to call to him, almost impatiently. Ameer's fingers traced the edges of the paper. Maybe the only way to understand was to start somewhere, even if the words felt inadequate. He lifted the pen again, this time slower, more deliberate. The first word he wrote was simple: fear. The word felt heavy, like it carried every sleepless night, every regret, every hesitation he had ever experienced. And yet, as he wrote, he realized he was not just naming his fear. He was acknowledging it. He was facing it. That alone felt revolutionary. Hours passed, though he didn't notice, as words poured from him in fits and starts. He wrote about moments he had kept secret from everyone. The times he froze when he should have acted, the opportunities he had let slip away, the people he had hurt without meaning to. Each word chipped away at the mental chains overthinking had forged around him. Each sentence made him feel both lighter and heavier at the same time, like carrying a storm that was finally learning to rain in measured drops. A sudden sound startled him, a metallic clang from the far edge of the yard. His heart raced. He stood quickly, pen still in hand, and peered into the shadows. Nothing moved, but the sense of being observed remained. Goosebumps prickled his skin. Overthinking had always trained him to anticipate danger, to question reality, to imagine threats where none existed, but this time the instinct didn't feel imaginary. It felt real. And that reality terrified him more than anything else. He forced himself to breathe, counting slowly to 10. The city was waking, distant horns and muffled voices reminding him that life continued outside this quiet, shadowed corner of the world. Ameer realized, almost with shame, that he had been hiding here, not just from others but from himself. And now, the encounter, the notebook, the cryptic message, it all demanded something of him. Ameer didn't know exactly what, but he felt it deep in his chest, like a pulse urging him forward. He returned to the crate, the cat still curled in his lap, and stared at the blank pages. Something had shifted. The fear was still there, gnawing and insistent, but beneath it was a strange electric sense of possibility. Overthinking had kept him alive, yes, but it had also kept him small. Maybe it was time to stop running from his own thoughts and start using them. And yet, before he could dive further, another vibration came from his pocket. The same number: "Tonight, the lion wakes. But only if he chooses to step out of the shadows." Ameer felt a chill. He looked around again, every shadow suddenly brimming with potential threats. He imagined the man in the coat appearing from the darkness, offering guidance again, but something about this message was different. It wasn't a promise. It was a challenge. And he knew in his gut that the night ahead would demand everything he had, or perhaps everything he thought he didn't have. Time became slippery. Daylight crept higher, casting a pale glow over the rusted tracks and abandoned containers. Ameer stood and walked slowly toward the exit of the yard, notebook clutched to his chest. He felt eyes on him, not just human eyes, but the weight of his own inner gaze, sharp and unrelenting. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground itself resisted him. Yet he moved. Movement was action. Action was courage, and courage was the first small rebellion against overthinking. As he reached the outer gate of the yard, he paused. He glanced back one last time at the place where the stranger had vanished, at the tracks where the train had roared, and at the shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. And for the first time, he allowed a thought he had long suppressed. I don't know what's coming next, but I will meet it. A sudden rustle from the corner of his eye pulled him from this resolve. From behind a stack of wooden pallets, two figures emerged, faces hidden beneath hooded jackets. Their approach was silent but deliberate. Ameer's heart leapt. He had walked through overthinking storms before, but the physical presence of unknown people brought a new, raw intensity. He felt the adrenaline surge, a mix of fear and focus that sharpened every sense. "Looking for someone?" the taller figure said, voice smooth and controlled, yet edged with danger. Ameer took a step back. I'm not sure. Maybe. Who are you?" The shorter figure laughed softly, almost a whisper. "Doesn't matter who we are. What matters is that you've been watched for a long time. And now you're ready, or at least we think you are, to see the first truth. The one that makes or breaks lions." Ameer's grip tightened around the notebook. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a physical force. He wanted to run, to escape the uncertainty, to retreat back into his mind where he felt at least some control. But something inside, the spark the stranger had lit, the faint heartbeat of courage he felt when writing in the notebook, urged him to stay. The taller figure nodded toward the gate, then back into the shadows. "Follow us if you dare. Or stay here and let your thoughts consume you. The choice is yours, lion." Ameer's breath caught in his throat. The word rang in his mind. Lion. He took a hesitant step forward, and then another. Every step echoed with fear, but also with a strange exhilaration. Somewhere deep inside, buried beneath years of hesitation, a part of him stirred, a part that had not been silenced entirely. The shadows shifted. The figures began to move, and Ameer followed, notebook pressed to his chest, Cat slipping silently beside him like an unlikely witness to a journey that had already begun. The city around them seemed to fade, leaving only the narrow path ahead and the darkness that promised both danger and revelation. Somewhere in the distance, faintly, a train's whistle blew, a reminder that movement, however frightening, was always possible. And as the path stretched before him, Ameer felt it, the first whisper of a truth he had long ignored. Overthinking could kill, paralyze, even destroy. But it could also be a weapon, a map, a mirror, if he learned how to wield it. The figures stopped at an unremarkable doorway tucked between two crumbling buildings. The taller one turned to him, voice low. "Inside, you will meet what you've been avoiding your entire life. The real you. Only then will the lion inside you awaken, or vanish forever." Ameer's hand shook as he reached for the door handle. His mind raced. Every scenario he had imagined was here, yet none of them matched the reality. He glanced at the cat, who rubbed against his leg. Its calm presence anchored him. He inhaled deeply, and with a final surge of determination, he turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. And from that darkness, a single voice called his name. Ameer. Ameer's heart pounded so loudly that he was sure the sound would betray him. The darkness inside the doorway was thick, almost tangible, pressing against his skin like a physical weight. The faint light from the street behind him barely reached inside, leaving only shadows that shifted and twisted, teasing his imagination. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to flee into the city where life continued oblivious to his struggle. But something deeper, an echo of that spark the stranger had ignited, urged him forward. He stepped inside, notebook clutched tightly against his chest, Cat slinking behind him silently. The air was cool and damp, smelling faintly of mold and rust, and it carried a strange, almost metallic tang. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he was not alone. Shapes emerged from the shadows, figures seated on the floor, leaning against walls, all draped in dark cloaks that made them almost part of the darkness itself. "Sit," the taller figure said, gesturing to an empty space near the center of the room. Ameer obeyed, though every muscle in his body remained tense. The door shut softly behind him, cutting off the last vestiges of daylight. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy, broken only by the faint shuffle of the cloaked figures. "You've come far, Ameer," a voice said, calm but layered with authority. The voice belonged to the taller figure, though the darkness distorted him, making it impossible to see his face clearly. Most people never take the first step. They drown in their thoughts, letting fear and doubt cage them. You, however, you followed the path when it was invisible, when it was dangerous, when it demanded more than courage. It demanded surrender. And that is why you are here. Ameer swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the words. Surrender? I've spent my whole life fighting, against my thoughts, against my fear. How can surrender be the next step? The figure's shadow shifted slightly. Because the battle you've been fighting is not external. It is inside you. And fighting it as you have, constantly analyzing, doubting, second-guessing, has made you a prisoner. Surrender is not weakness. It is acknowledgement. It is facing what you are afraid to see and saying, "I will not run any more." Only then can you begin to wield your mind, rather than be enslaved by it. Ameer felt a shiver run down his spine. He had never heard someone articulate what he had felt all his life with such precision. He wanted to argue, to say that overthinking had saved him more than it had cost him, but the truth was undeniable. Every choice he had hesitated on, every opportunity he had let slip, every relationship he had sabotaged, it all traced back to the prison he had built inside his own head. Another figure, shorter and quieter, stepped forward. "You think the lion is born fearless," the figure said. "But lions are not born that way. They learn. They are taught by the world, by experience, by pain. And most importantly, by confrontation. And now, Ameer, you are about to confront your own mind." Ameer's stomach tightened. The words felt like a warning, yet also a challenge. Confront my mind? What does that mean? The taller figure moved closer, his presence commanding yet calm. It means looking at the truth of who you are. Not who you imagine you are, not who you wish you were, not the mask you show the world. The real you. Your fears, your desires, your failures, your regrets. The parts you hide, even from yourself. Tonight, those parts will speak, and you will have to listen. And when you do, only then will the lion awaken. The room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, and Ameer felt a strange combination of fear and anticipation. He wanted to run, yet the thought of retreat felt hollow, meaningless. He had already taken the first steps outside the shadows, and somehow he knew he could not go back now. "Sit still," the taller figure instructed. "Close your eyes. Listen. And let the journey begin." Ameer obeyed, his breathing uneven, his mind screaming with thoughts and doubts, yet also curious, hungry. He closed his eyes and tried to focus, listening to the faint sounds in the room, the quiet shuffle of cloaks, the distant hum of the city beyond the walls, and a rhythmic, almost imperceptible heartbeat that seemed to echo his own. Slowly, the darkness behind his eyelids began to shift. Shapes formed, first faintly, then more distinctly. Faces appeared, some familiar, some strange. Some were mirrors of his own, distorted and fragmented. They whispered his name, each tone carrying a different emotion: anger, regret, longing, fear. "You avoided me for too long," one voice hissed, sharp and bitter. "You should have faced me years ago, when you had the chance." "Why do you hesitate?" another voice asked, softer, pleading. "I've been waiting for you to remember me, to accept me." Ameer's chest tightened. The voices were coming from inside him. He recognized them, old versions of himself, past mistakes, fears he had buried, moments he had denied. And yet they were not attacking. They were testing him, probing him, daring him to respond. I don't know if I can, he whispered. His voice sounded strange even to him, fragile, uncertain. You can, the first voice replied, sharper now. But only if you stop thinking and start feeling. Stop analyzing every possibility and just face us. Face yourself. Ameer took a deep breath. His mind was a storm, but in the center of it he felt a faint calm. He thought of the notebook, of the stranger's words, of the cat sitting quietly beside him, a small heartbeat of life amidst chaos. He realized that overthinking had given him tools, yes, but courage was not one of them. Courage had to be found in the act itself, in the confrontation, in choosing to step forward despite fear. I'm ready, he said, voice firmer this time, trembling but determined. The darkness shifted again, and the voices merged into one. Then look, it said, and suddenly Ameer was no longer sitting in the room. He was standing on a cliff, high above a stormy sea. Lightning split the sky, waves crashed against jagged rocks below, and the wind tore at his clothes. He could see a reflection of himself in the water, small, fragile, hesitant, and behind it a lion, golden and fierce, moving through the storm with eyes that burned like fire. You see, the voice said, the lion is not separate from you. It has always been inside. But fear, hesitation, doubt, they have kept it chained. Tonight, the choice is yours. Will you remain a reflection, or will you step forward and claim what has always been yours? Ameer's legs shook. The storm was terrifying, the waves roaring with the weight of every fear he had ever felt. But the lion's gaze was unwavering, steady, commanding. It was not a threat. It was a mirror. It was a challenge. He reached forward, toward the reflection and the lion both. His hand trembled, but he moved. Each step felt like lifting the weight of years from his shoulders. The wind tore at him, the rain soaked him, but he didn't stop. He stepped closer, and the reflection began to ripple, the surface of the water distorting, and the lion stepped forward too, merging with him. Ameer's breath came fast, his heart racing, his mind a cacophony of fear, doubt, and exhilaration. And then, in one sudden electric moment, he felt it, the surge of strength, the fire of courage, the clarity of mind that had been buried under years of overthinking. He was not separate from the lion. He had been it all along. The storm didn't disappear. The waves didn't calm. But Ameer felt a strange peace, a raw power that pulsed through him. And just as he was beginning to understand, the darkness behind his closed eyes shifted once more, whispering a single word. Awaken. Ameer's eyes shot open, the echo of the word awaken still vibrating in his chest. The room was quiet again, cloaked in shadows, yet it felt different somehow. The heaviness that had pressed on him earlier was gone, replaced by an electric tension, like the moment right before a storm breaks. His body felt lighter, sharper, as though the act of confronting his inner storm had changed something deep inside him. The taller figure stepped closer, his face still half hidden in shadow. "You have glimpsed what lies beneath," he said. "But glimpsing is not enough. Seeing is not enough. You must integrate it. You must let the lion live in every step, every choice, every breath. Otherwise, the reflection will fade, and fear will return." Ameer's hands gripped the notebook tighter. "I feel it. I feel the strength. But it's fleeting. How do I hold on to it when everything outside feels so heavy, so uncertain?" The shorter figure crouched beside him, voice low but sharp. "Because the lion is not a shield against life. It is a guide. It doesn't remove the storm. It teaches you to move through it without drowning. Every thought, every doubt, every hesitation you've carried can become fuel if you learn how to channel it. You've been thinking too much, yes, but now it's time to think with purpose, to think as a weapon, not a cage." Ameer closed his eyes again, trying to steady his racing heart. He imagined the stormy sea from before, the lion merging with his reflection. For a long moment he let himself feel the fear he had always suppressed, the fear of failure, of rejection, of insignificance. Then he let himself feel the power, the clarity, the courage that had been buried beneath it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the two sensations began to merge, not canceling each other out, but coexisting. A sudden movement made him flinch. The cat, still perched on the crate beside him, hissed at something in the corner of the room. Ameer's head snapped toward the sound, and he saw a faint glow emerging from the darkness. The light coalesced into the form of a doorway, one that had not been there before. It pulsed softly, inviting, almost breathing. "That door," the taller figure said, noticing his gaze, "leads to what you have been avoiding most, the challenge that overthinking has shielded you from. To walk through it is to face not just your fears, but the truth of your life, the choices you've made, the paths you've abandoned, the person you've been pretending not to be. Only by facing it can you awaken fully." Ameer's pulse quickened. He felt both drawn and repelled. "And if I fail?" The taller figure's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "Then you learn. The lion does not always succeed at first. It tests, it falls, it rises. Failure is a lesson, not a verdict. But you will not know until you step through." Ameer's hand hovered over the doorknob. He thought of every time he had retreated, every time he had let fear or doubt control him. The weight of those years pressed on him, but now it was different. It was a weight he could bear, a challenge he could meet. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself, and turned the knob. The door swung open into darkness, so complete it felt like stepping into another world. He took a tentative step forward. The darkness seemed to close around him, swallowing the sound of his footsteps. Then, slowly, shapes began to emerge, fragments of memory, distorted scenes from his past. Faces of people he had hurt, opportunities he had let slip, moments when he had been too afraid to act. "You see yourself," the shorter figure's voice echoed, though they were no longer beside him. "All the fragments you've hidden, all the moments you've denied. Confront them. Speak to them. Understand them. Only by acknowledging them can you move forward." Ameer's throat tightened. He didn't want to face some of these moments, especially the ones where he had let others down, the mistakes that had haunted him for years. But the lion inside him, steady, patient, unyielding, urged him onward. He spoke aloud, voice trembling at first, recounting moments he had buried deep. He named his failures, admitted his fears, and acknowledged the pain he had caused both himself and others. The darkness responded. Shadows shifted, the fragments rearranged themselves, forming clearer images. But now, instead of fear, Ameer felt understanding. He realized that the overthinking that had caged him was not entirely an enemy. It had been a guide, signaling danger, preparing him, warning him. But it had become excessive, misdirected, controlling. Now, by facing the truths it had hidden, he could harness it instead of being trapped by it. A sudden voice, deep and resonant, broke through the darkness. "You are learning. But there is one final truth you must see." Ameer froze. "What truth?" "You believe overthinking makes you weak," the voice said. "But it does not. Weakness comes from denial, from running, from refusing to confront yourself. The mind is your tool, your weapon, your ally. But only if you stop letting fear dictate its use." The shadows shifted again, and in the center of the darkness a figure emerged. It was a reflection of Ameer himself, older, stronger, eyes burning with a mixture of fire and sorrow. The reflection stepped forward and spoke without moving its lips. "You have been hiding from me, from yourself. But the lion is ready to awaken. Will you let me in?" Ameer's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed caution, every fear whispered retreat. Yet the courage he had cultivated, small but persistent, held him in place. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I am ready. The reflection merged with him in a burst of light and energy that knocked the breath out of him. He felt a surge of strength, clarity, and focus that coursed through every fiber of his being. For the first time, he felt whole, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. The overthinking that had once imprisoned him now hummed in harmony with his newfound power. It was no longer a cage. It was a weapon, a guide, a reflection of his own capacity to rise. And then, just as suddenly, the darkness dissolved. Ameer was back in the room, the cat still beside him, the notebook open in front of him. But everything felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less oppressive. He had not changed the world, not yet, but he had changed himself. The lion inside him was awake. Before he could savor the moment, the taller figure's voice broke the silence. You have taken the first step, but the path ahead is not yet clear. Challenges will come, and darkness will return, as it always does. The question is whether you will face it, or let it consume you again. Ameer nodded. He felt the truth in the words. Courage was not a single act. It was continuous, a series of choices, a commitment to face the storm every time it arose. He looked down at the notebook. The pages that had been blank were now filled with his words, his confessions, his insights. But the book itself seemed to pulse, as if urging him onward. A sudden movement in the shadows caught his eye. Another door had appeared, smaller, narrower, barely visible in the dim light. Ameer instinctively knew it led deeper, to the next layer of confrontation, the next level of awakening. He glanced at the taller figure. Is this the next step? The figure nodded. Yes. But know this, what lies beyond will test not just your mind, but your heart, your soul. The lion will need more than courage here. It will need discernment, willpower, and the ability to act when others hesitate. Are you prepared to continue? Ameer's fingers brushed the door handle. He took a deep breath, feeling the lion's strength within him, steady and unwavering. I am ready, he said, voice firm, echoing in the quiet room. The door creaked open, revealing darkness deeper than the last. A chill swept through the room as if the air itself were warning him. Yet Ameer stepped forward, cat at his side, notebook clutched to his chest. Every step felt lighter, surer, powered by the clarity he had gained and the lion now fully awake inside him. And as he disappeared into the darkness, the taller figure's voice whispered, almost to himself, Let the true test begin. Ameer emerged from the darkness into a space that seemed to exist outside of time. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor, only a vast expanse of light and shadow intertwined, pulsing like the heartbeat of the universe itself. He felt weightless, yet grounded, every fiber of his being vibrating with clarity, with awareness, with an unshakable sense of purpose. The journey through overthinking, fear, hesitation, and doubt had brought him here, not to a place, but to a state of mind, a state of being that few ever reached. The challenges he had faced, the stranger in the train yard, the cryptic notebook, the shadows of his own mind, had all been steps in a single, deliberate process. Each confrontation, each fear he had named aloud, each truth he had acknowledged, had strengthened him. He realized now that overthinking had not been his enemy, but a teacher, a mirror, a tool. The lion had always been inside him. He had simply needed to claim it. And now the lion was awake, fierce and poised, unafraid of the storms that had once paralyzed him. Ameer's reflection shimmered in the light, a version of himself he had never truly known, strong, calm, unyielding, eyes alight with determination. He saw not only who he was, but who he could become. The weight of regret, which had once pressed down on him like chains, was gone. In its place was understanding, that every mistake, every hesitation, every night spent consumed by thought, had shaped him into the person capable of this moment. Fear had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. It was a tool, a signal, a compass guiding him toward action rather than a barrier keeping him imprisoned.
In the distance, He saw the paths of his life stretched out like rivers, some flowing smoothly, some churning with turbulence. He understood now that life would always present obstacles, always challenge him with doubts, fears, and distractions. The world would never pause, and problems would never cease. But he had learned the greatest truth. The world could no longer dictate his inner state. The lion inside him had the power to move through the storm without being swept away, to act decisively even when fear whispered lies, to create, to conquer, to rise. A gentle voice echoed around him, warm, calm, yet commanding. You have awakened, Amy. Not because the storm ended, but because you learned to stand in it. Not because you conquered the world, but because you conquered yourself. The lion does not slay obstacles by avoiding them. It moves through them, fearless, relentless, wise. And so must you. Ameer's chest swelled with an uncontainable emotion. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, not of sorrow, but of release, of triumph, of recognition. Every sleepless night, every paralyzing doubt, every imagined failure, he saw them now as the necessary fire that forged his courage. The overthinking that had tormented him for years was no longer a prison. It was a map, a weapon, a source of insight. Every thought, harnessed, became a tool to navigate life with precision, clarity, and strength. He turned and looked back, imagining the shadows that had haunted him, the doors he had passed through, the voices of his fears. They were no longer threats. They were reminders of how far he had come, markers of a journey that had been as much inward as outward. Amy smiled, a slow, radiant smile, feeling the power of his own resilience and wisdom. The lion roared inside him, not with aggression, but with confidence, with the kind of clarity that no fear could shake. The light around him shifted, flowing like liquid, wrapping him in warmth and energy. He understood that awakening was not a singular event. It was a continuous practice, a decision made moment by moment, to rise above hesitation, to act despite doubt, to embrace the fullness of life with courage. The storms would come again, as they always did. Challenges would appear, uncertainties would press in, and fears would return. But he was ready. The lion inside him would never be caged again. Amy felt his mind sharpen, his senses heightened. The world was vibrant, rich with possibilities, every moment offering an opportunity to act, to create, to move. He realized that overthinking, properly directed, could become the greatest ally, a way to anticipate, to strategize, to deepen understanding. But action, courage, and decisiveness would remain the currency of living fully. The balance was his to command, and now he commanded it. In that magnificent clarity, he felt a surge of gratitude, not just for his victories, but for his struggles. Every fear faced, every doubt confronted, every night spent in restless thought had brought him here. He understood the paradox. Without overthinking, he may never have been forced to awaken. Without fear, he may never have discovered the lion within. The trials of the mind, the battles of the spirit, and the relentless self-cultivation energy had not destroyed him. They had prepared him for greatness. Amy took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of life flow through him. The world was no longer something to fear or resist. It was something to navigate with wisdom, strength, and courage. The lion was awake, the mind was aligned, and the spirit was ready. He was no longer a prisoner of thought, but a master of it. The journey had revealed the ultimate truth. The power to transform life, to overcome fear, to act decisively, and to live fully had always been within him. It had merely awaited recognition, courage, and awakening. And as he opened his eyes fully, back in the room that had once felt so dark and confining, Amy knew he had changed irreversibly. He was ready to face the world, to move with purpose, to live as a lion in a land that often demanded sheep. The path ahead would still hold challenges, but he no longer feared them. The storm could rage, the shadows could press in, the doubts could whisper, but he would step forward, fierce, unwavering, awake. Life had not simplified, but he had simplified himself. He had faced the mind, faced the heart, faced the deepest fears, and emerged whole, powerful, and alive. The lion had awakened, and with it, Amy had claimed his true self. And in that profound awakening, he understood the final truth. Overthinking is not the enemy. Fear is not the enemy. Hesitation is not the enemy. The enemy is avoidance. To confront, to feel, to act, this is the path of the lion, the path of mastery, the path of life. Amy smiled one last time, feeling the surge of life, strength, and purpose flow through him. The lion within was no longer hidden, no longer caged, no longer silent. He had awakened. Subscribe to my channel for videos like this.